Hello, bachcho. How are you? How are you doing? Hope you're studying for your exams well, small topics, studying. And as always, I'm starting again the class with a very positive thought for you all. And that thought is you are only confined by the walls you build yourself. So don't build any walls for yourself that I cannot do this. If you think you can do that, you can always do that. So don't think that I will not get a good rank or this subject is difficult, physics is difficult, or chemistry is difficult, I am not getting it. Don't get demotivated. Jo nahi ho raha, lage raho. Kabhi na kabhi hoga. You will improve yourself. Sufficient amount of time hota hai. You have 24 hours in a day. Do good time management. Sit for 3.5 hours in one sitting. 3 hours of study, half an hour of revision. Then again, eat, play, talk to your parents, go for a run, go for cycling, then again 3.5 hours of study, right? So now let's again start the chapter, a small subtopic of the chapter, digestion and absorption. And today's subtopic is the neural regulation in digestion, right? Neural regulation in digestion. So let's start this topic. Whenever we eat, or let us first divide this, and then I'll tell you what happens when we eat. So this neural regulation is divided into 3 phases. The cephalic phase, right? The cephalic phase, the most interesting phase where we see and taste and smell. The gastric phase and the intestinal phase. Okay, so what are the 3 phases that the neural regulation and digestion is divided? Cephalic phase, gastric phase, and intestinal phase. Come on, let's do the first phase, that is the cephalic phase. What happens in the cephalic phase? Let us now see. So whenever your mama cooks good food or you go to a restaurant, what happens? You smell the food, you see the food, and then you finally taste the food, right? So what is actually happening when you are doing all these things? What is happening in our body when we are doing these things? This is activating the neural centers. Okay, what happens? It activates the neural centers. And where? In the cerebral cortex. When we'll do this, brain and all, these all structures will be very clear to you. Hypothalamus and the brain stem. Okay. So the neural centers, what does it do? The neural centers in the cerebral cortex, hypothalamus and the brain stem are activated. Okay, they get activated. Now what happens? Then what does this brain stem do? Then it activates what? Then it activates the facial, glossopharyngeal, and vagus nerves. I'm not telling you about all these nerves because we'll be doing this in a different chapter, right? And then what happens? The facial and the glossopharyngeal nerves stimulate the salivary glands. Muh mein pani aana is done by what? The facial and the glossopharyngeal nerves to secrete what? To secrete obviously saliva. While the vagus nerves do what? They stimulate what? They stimulate the gastric glands. We have already done gastric glands in detail. To secrete what? To secrete saliva? No. To secrete gastric juice. Okay. Then what happened? Okay. Now we have studied what? That the neural centers activate the cerebral cortex, hypothalamus, and the brain stem. And then what happens? The brain stem activates the facial and the glossopharyngeal nerves, and the vagus nerves. The facial and the glossopharyngeal nerves stimulate what? The salivary gland, and the vagus nerve stimulates the gastric glands. Salivary gland secretes saliva and the gastric gland secrete gastric juice. I'm telling you only the amount that is needed for your questions, right? Because this itself is a very big chapter. Okay. Now, what is the purpose of cephalic? Nothing happens in the body without any purpose. What is the purpose of cephalic digestion? Purpose of cephalic digestion. The purpose is very simple. It is just to prepare the mouth and stomach for the food that is about to be eaten. It just prepares the mouth and the stomach for the food that is about to be eaten. You smelled and then you saw the food and then you finally got the initial taste of the food, right? And this, there's a name for that reflex also, and this is known as conditional reflex, where you have learned that the food is coming, it is tasting good, so your mouth is salivating, the stomach is getting ready to accept the food, and so on, right? Now let's come on do the gastric phase. Not much has to be done here, right? The gastric phase, what happens once the food reaches, now where the food is in the stomach. Now what will happen? जैसे ही the food will come into stomach, the gastric phase will start. Okay, the gastric phase starts, right? And what will happen here? The gastric secretions. We'll do this in neural regulation just now. Gastric secretions and gastric mobility. This will increase. The churning of the food, right? Now the third phase was what? Intestinal phase. The third phase was intestinal phase. What happens in the intestinal phase? When does it start? When the food enters small intestine. Okay? When the food enters small intestine, this intestinal phase occurs. Now, what was happening in the cephalic and the gastric phases? What was happening? The sensory activity was and the motility was increasing. But now, what will happen? It will, in the intestinal phase, there are inhibitory effects. Inhibitory effects. What are inhibitory effects? That slow the exit of chyme from stomach, right? So that slowly the food is going from the stomach to the intestine. And why? Why it has an inhibitory effect? So that, the duodenum is the first part, so that duodenum is not overloaded, or else what will happen? There will be more food than it can handle. Okay, there will be more food than can be handled by the duodenum, right? Just read once what is inhibitory effect. Okay, so now these all phases of digestion are regulated by what? Are regulated by neural and hormonal mechanisms. Hormonal mechanisms. As I told you, I'll be just doing the neural mechanism here. And in the next video, a small, so 10-15 minutes video, I'll be doing a hormonal mechanism. And why I'm doing just the neural mechanism? Because generally what I have seen is that kids don't just understand the neural mechanism and they just mug it up and they're not able to do the questions, and a lot of questions come on these mechanisms. So I'll be doing it in, you know, a little bit, a 10 minutes, 15 minutes detail, and then hormonal mechanism also in 10, 15 minutes detailed, not in just, you know, giving points and just ratify it. You have to understand, and you don't have to, you have to learn, obviously you have to learn, but then the learning becomes with understanding. You cannot just, you know, there'll be no fun if you're not understanding, right? So now let's get a bit serious, and because we are going to do a little tricky part now in the neural mechanism. This was all, you know, the fun part. Now a little tricky part. So now we will start with the gut brain. What is gut brain? You know, no one has ever heard in this class what is gut brain, right? Or now listen, we have done this. Enteric nervous system. Why is it called gut brain? Have you ever given a thought? Because all the neurons of the spinal cord put together, all the neurons of the spinal cord put together is equal to the neurons of the enteric nervous system, right? So that's why it can be called as a gut brain. So in this, we'll be doing two things. We'll be doing what? We'll be doing the myenteric nerve plexus and the submucosal nerve plexus. When we were doing the histology of alimentary canal, I just told you a bit about that, and I told you that we'll be doing it in detail afterwards. So now that afterwards has arrived, so we're doing the myenteric nerve plexus, and that is also known by one name. When I was writing, you should have this name should already be there in your mind, because we have already done this name in histology, right? Meissner's plexus. Come on, now let's start. So the first layer is what? I'll make it with orange. The first layer is what? Think. Suppose this is the mucosa, right? Suppose this is what? Mucosa. Mucosa is divided into three parts, you know, epithelium, lamina propria, and muscularis mucosa, right? Now, let's come to this. And then there are circular muscular layer, right? Circular muscular. And then there is this longitudinal muscular layer. Okay, I'll draw all the receptors. I'll draw all the receptors that are needed. These are the longitudinal muscular layer. Okay. And then there is what? Then there is this, our fine serosa. Right? This is what? Our serosa. Right? Serosa. And longitudinal muscular layer. I'm drawing a basic structure. Obviously, you can say in stomach there is oblique and all, but you know, we are not doing histology. We are doing the neural regulation, right? Now, there are a few glands over here. Let me draw a gland. Okay, please draw with me, then only you will understand this, right? Now, I'll draw a receptor over here. Okay, what is this that I am drawing? I am drawing a receptor. I'll draw a few fibers over here. Right? These are what? These are descending fibers. Why are they descending fibers? I'll just tell you once I draw these descending fibers. Then I'll draw these ascending fibers. Okay, these are what? These are ascending fibers. So these are ascending fibers. Draw with me or else you won't be able to get it. These are descending fibers, right? And this I was making a receptor, right? What is this? This is a chemoreceptor that I have made. We'll see how all these work. First, let us draw, right? So this is a chemoreceptor. And then there is, with what color? This color I'll draw. This is these are nerve fibers that I'm drawing, right? So this was the mucosa, then the submucosa, then the submucosa. And what is this that I have drawn? It is the submucosal plexus, group of neurons. And this is what that I have drawn. It is the myenteric plexus, or what? Or the Orbac plexus. Orbac plexus, right? These are the green one are the descending fibers and the blue ones are the ascending fibers, right? And this is the longitudinal layer, and then there is the serosa. Okay, now let us see what will happen. Here I will also draw one stretch receptors, where here I'll draw one stretch receptor. So this is what I have drawn. This is a stretch receptor, right? Okay, now what will happen? You have to see this diagram and understand this first, right? These are the glands that I have made. Please understand this diagram. This is mucosa, submucosa, submucosal plexus, myenteric plexus, descending and ascending. Now the question comes, why ascending and descending? Because we are assuming that this is the oral side, you know, and this is the anal side. So our aim is that the food should get digested, absorbed, and from the oral side it should go to the anal side, right? This is our what? This is our aim, and this is the lumen. Please understand this. It is a bit not tricky, interesting, right? Now let us see what will happen when the food will come. When the food will come, it will do what? Obviously food will come to bada ho jayega area, right? Stretch ho jayega area. Bada ho jayega, stretch ho jayega. There's a fancy word for it. Distended, or what we can say, the food will cause distension, right? Ab kya hoga? What will happen when this GI tract, gastrointestinal tract, will distend? Then what will happen? It will stimulate what? It is getting distended, stretched, so it will stimulate what? Obviously it will stimulate the stretch receptors. It will stimulate the stretch receptors will get activated, right? Now two things will happen. When they get activated, two things will happen. Now let us see what is the first thing that is happening. So what will the first thing when they will happen will that these descending fibers will what will happen to, they will get activated, right? They will get activated. Where are the descending fibers? These green colored things that you see, these descending fibers, they will get activated. So this stretch receptors, these stretch receptors will activate what? Will activate the descending fibers. Okay, now see, there are axons from the stretch receptor sending axons to this descending fibers, and they are getting activated. Okay, and what will happen when this will get activated? So when they get activated, what will happen? The inner circular layer, something will happen in the circular layer and in the longitudinal muscular layer. There will be a negative effect here and a positive effect here. Now let us talk about what are we saying when we say that there will be a negative effect on the circular layer and a positive effect on the longitudinal layer when the descending fibers are getting activated. This is the first step that we are talking about. So descending fibers get activated, the circular layer. Remember, the circular layer contracts. And it contracts, since it's a circular layer, basically what happens, it acts as a sphincter. Sphincter is what? What do we say? Sphincter is basically like a valve, like a thing. So these circular muscular layer are acting like a sphincter, and they produce a constriction ring. And what happens when there is something, you know, it is like a ring, what will happen? It will push the food, and it pushing the food towards anal side. This was our goal, right? This was our goal. Now what is happening? Longitudinal layer. What is happening to the longitudinal layer? What is happening to the, when longitudinal layer will contract, what will happen? What happens when it contracts? It opens up the lumen, right? What happens? It opens up the lumen that is behind. Okay, but what we want, do we want that the longitudinal layer contracts and it opens up the lumen? No. What we want is that the circular layer contracts. It contracts. It pushes the food. It pushes the food towards anal side, right? And what is the second thing that we want? The second thing that we want is the longitudinal muscles relax. Relax. And the lumen behind is not going to increase. Okay, so this is the first thing when the stretch receptors get activated. This is the first thing that is happening. So what is happening? The first thing, this is the stretch receptor that we have drawn. What is happening? These descending fibers are getting activated, and there is a negative effect, or the negative effect, when I mean, it means the circular layer contracts, pushing the food in front, that is to the anal side, not in front here, I mean towards the anal side. It contracts, pushing the food towards the anal side. It relaxes. It relaxes. Okay, it relaxes, and the lumen is not going to increase. Okay, now what is the second thing that is happening? Let us see what is the second thing. I told you, right, that there are two things happening when the food is coming and causing distension and the stretch receptors are being stimulated. Two things are happening. First thing we have discussed. Now let us study the second thing that will happen. Now the stretch receptors will also stimulate ascending fibers. Now what will happen when those blue colored ascending fibers are getting activated? Now what is happening? Now circular layer relaxes, just the opposite, and the longitudinal layer and the contracts. Now when it contracts, what happens? The lumen increases and more food comes inside, or it accepts the food. right? Because slowly the food should come. So now the ascending fibers get activated so that more food can come inside. Now let us see in the diagram. These are the stretch receptors. Now what is happening? These are the blue colored are the ascending fibers. So now what is happening? This is relaxing and this is contracting. This is relaxing and this is contracting so that more food, lumen will happen to what? Lumen will increase, and what will happen? More food will come inside. I hope you are getting it, right? So now the body is ready to accept more food. Now let us see what will happen. Now there are certain chemicals. There are certain chemicals that can stimulate chemoreceptors. We don't have to go in much in detail. You will do this in your MBBS. Chemoreceptors. Okay. Now there are obviously the chemoreceptors will be activated by certain receptors. What will happen when they get activated? The submucosal plexus. Remember the submucosal plexus? It can stimulate what? It will stimulate certain glands. Remember in the submucosa there are certain glands which have what? Which have ducts and tubes, and which increases the secretion. Which increases the secretions. And it can also stimulate what? There are certain blood vessels. And when it gets stimulated, what? The blood vessels get dilated. The blood vessels get dilated, and when they get dilated, what happens? The blood flow, obviously it is getting dilated, the blood flow will increase, and the blood flow will increase. So what will happen in the GI tract? The absorption increases, right? Now let us see what is happening in the diagram. This is the chemoreceptor, right? This is the chemoreceptor that we have drawn. What is happening? These glands get activated, right? And it is activating these submucosal plexus. Okay, it is activating this submucosal plexus, and due to which what is happening? These glands which have ducts and tubes, their secretions increases. And what is the second thing that I told you? That their secretions get increases, and the second thing that happened, there are few blood vessels, right? There are few blood vessels. What will happen? This will also get dilated so that the absorption increases, blood flow increases, and the absorption increases, right? Now let us see. One more thing I'll tell you, and then this neural regulation will be over. Submucosal plexus, the submucosal plexus can also stimulate S cells. S cells will do what? They will increase the secretion of secretin, and this secretin will do what? It will tell the liver for what? For bile synthesis. And we have done in absorption and digestion of fats that bile is used for what? For emulsification. And it will also tell the acinar cells of pancreas. It will also tell the acinar cells of pancreas to increase what? To increase the pancreatic or the bicarbonate rich pancreatic juice. And it will also stimulate the eye cells for what? For cholecystokinin. Remember we did this. And it will do what? This cholecystokinin will tell the gallbladder, right? to tell the gallbladder to contract, and when it contract, what will happen? It will expel bile. Remember, what is the purpose of gallbladder? It stores concentrated bile. Okay. Now, what else will it do? This cholecystokinin, it will also tell the pancreas to increase what? To increase the secretion of proteases and lipases and amylases, right? And it also will do what? It will also relax the sphincter of Oddi. Okay. Remember the sphincter of Oddi that I have told you many times, right? I've told you so many times, this gallbladder, left and right hepatic duct, cystic duct, and the main pancreatic duct, and then there is a circular ring that is called the sphincter of Oddi. So what is this doing? Some mucosal plexus can also stimulate the S cells and the I cells. What do S cells do? They increase the secretion of secretin. Remember, secretin, and the secretin will tell liver to do what? To increase the bile synthesis, and to pancreas to increase the pancreatic juice. And what else can it do? These are the major effects, and there are few minor effects also. It will inhibit. You can also learn that it will inhibit what? It will inhibit secretion of gastric juice. What will the I cells do? They will increase the secretion of cholecystokinin, right? Cholecystokinin, and it stimulates the secretion of pancreatic juice. It increases the secretion of pancreatic juice, and it causes the ejection, or it tells the gallbladder to contract and expel bile. Okay, now what else can I tell you? Right, then there is also one thing that you should know, that there is this entergastrone or gastric inhibitory peptide, GIP, right? GIP, and it is secreted from duodenal epithelium. And what will it do? It will reduce peristalsis, because it is what? It is an inhibitory peptide and stop secretions of gastric juices. Gastric juices. So I hope this neural, I told you I'll be doing neural regulation, but yes, I took the hormonal secretions also, but I will, as promised, I will make a small 10 minutes video for hormonal secretion again. So now let us see this diagram again and understand once again. This is mucosa, submucosa, mucosa, submucosa, submucosal plexus, and submucosal plexus and myenteric plexus, right? So what was happening in the stretch receptors? These stretch receptors, first thing, what do? They will contract this circular layer, this minus sign I have made, and they will relax this. So when it contracts, what happens? The food is getting pushed towards the anal side, and this is our aim, because when it is contracting, there's a constriction ring kind of thing form, right? And what is happening the second time? The ascending fibers are getting activated. And what do these ascending fibers do? Let us see. These ascending fibers will send axons, and they will say to the circular fibers, now you relax, and to this longitudinal fiber that you contract, right? The opposites will happen. Then we did about the chemoreceptors, right? The S cells, the I cells, the cholecystokinin, and the GIP. So please study about this. We'll be doing the questions on these things, and then you will understand it more nicely, and then you will understand how to apply these, right? So second thing, Okay, I enjoyed a lot, and let us see how well you do the questions, right? So now what we'll do, we have almost completed the chapter. Once I'll just again, in the absorption only, I had taken everything once again very quickly. First, I'll make this video, hormonal control. And then what will I do? Then I'll just do absorption and assimilation, because that's the way it's given in the books. Although when I was telling you digestion of protein, fats, and carbohydrates, I told you this, but again, I'll just take a small video, absorption and assimilation of digested food, and then what is given in the book, and then finally the disorders. And then we are done. The chapter is almost finished. You can start doing the questions, because I have already done hormonal control and absorption and assimilation. Just for your sake, that in the book it's given like this, I'll do it. So finally, only the disorders are left now. So we'll start with the questions. And let me see how many questions you guys can do. Okay, nice session. Hope you guys enjoyed. Study well. Bye-bye.